you'll find all over the landscape people presume that those that hold conspiracy theories are some kind of wacko nuts. Now, it intrigues me that, in fact, part of the mission statement of one of these ministries claims to be an expertise in watching conspiracy theories, and yet it's obvious as we look at their publications, they are simply uninformed. This came up in a discussion with Chuck. They started talking about conspiracy theories, and Chuck stopped them at the comma. He says, wait a minute, didn't you hear the State of the Union address the other day? And if you were paying attention, you saw global, 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 global. And I want to hit this one head on because there's a concept being promoted in the mainline media that anyone that adheres to some kind of conspiracy pushing us towards a world government are somehow worthy of ridicule. And the standard attack on these views maintains that the New World Order is the result of a turn-of-the-century, right-wing, bigoted, anti-Semitic group of racists acting in the tradition of the long-ago debunked protocols of the learned elders of Zion, and so forth. Now, admittedly, on the landscape there are some weird groups promoting some weird ideas, but these are peripheral, have little to do with this tide towards the New World Order. The historical record, if you do your homework, does not support these positions that are promoted by the mainline media or by people who would seem to be theoretically are within the body of Christ. The New World Order term has been used thousands of times since the turn of the century, not by the right, but by the left that's promoting it and in high places of our federal government. Those involved in promoting the so-called New World Order, some of them, a few of them have been Jewish. The preponderance have not, and so this is not some kind of Jewish plot as some of these anti-Semites would like to promote. Let's take a look at the reality. For years, leaders in education, in the industry, and in media, banking, have promoted a worldview that is equivalent to theirs. You say that, gee, just because some individuals promote a common viewpoint, that doesn't constitute a conspiracy. Well, that's true, except some of it has been somewhat underground, but it's now become a very open conspiracy. And it was described by Fabian socialist H.G. Wells in a book called The Open Conspiracy, Blueprints for a World Revolution, published in 1928. But you can go back to 1913 as another example. This is prior to the passage of the Federal Reserve Act, which of course is neither federal nor a reserve anyway. President Wilson's The New Freedom was published in 1913, in which he said as follows, quote, "Since I entered politics, I have chiefly had men's views confided to me privately." This is the President of the United States saying this. "Some of the biggest men in the United States in the field of commerce and manufacturing are afraid of somebody, and they're afraid of something. They know that there is a power somewhere, so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they had better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it," close quote. That's by President Wilson, not some newsletter writer. On November 21st, 1933, President Franklin Roosevelt wrote a letter to Colonel Edward Mandell House, President Woodrow Wilson's close advisor. "The real truth of the matter is, as you and I know, that a financial element of larger centers has owned the government ever since the days of Andrew Jackson," and on he goes. See, that there is such a thing as a cabal of power brokers who control the government behind the scenes. That has been detailed many times in this century by creditable sources. Professor Carroll Quigley, who was incidentally Bill Clinton's mentor at Georgetown University, President Clinton incidentally publicly has paid homage to him at least twice publicly. Now, in Quigley's magnum opus, it's called Tragedy and Hope, and it's available again from publishers, published originally in 1966. He said as follows. This is the expert on this whole subject from the inside. Quote, "There does exist and has existed for a generation an international network which operates to some extent in the way that the radical right believes that the Communists act. In fact, this network, which we may identify as the roundtable groups, has no aversion to cooperating with the Communists, nor any other groups that frequently does so. I know of the operations of this network because I have studied it for 20 years and was permitted for 2 years in the early 60s to examine its papers and its secret records. I have no aversion to it or to most of its aims, and have for much of my life been close to it and many of its instruments. I have objected, both in the past and recently, to a few of its policies. But in general, my chief difference of opinion is that it wishes to remain unknown, and I believe its role in history is significant enough to be known. And of course, now it is known. Even Rush Limbaugh, as outspoken critic of anyone claiming to push for global government, said on his February 7th, 1995 program, quote, "You see, if you amount to anything in Washington these days, it is because you've been plucked or handpicked from an Ivy League school, Harvard, Yale, Kennedy School of Government. You have shown an aptitude to be good Ivy League type, and so you're plucked, so to speak, and you are assigned success. You are assigned a certain role in the government somewhere, and then your success is monitored and tracked, and you go where the pluckers and handpickers can put you." And he goes on about that, which is interesting, anyway. On May 4th of 1993, the Council for Foreign Relations, the president of the Council for Foreign Relations, Leslie Gelb, said on the Charlie Rose Show, "You, that is Charlie, had me before to talk about the New World Order. I talk about it all the time. It's one world now. The Council," meaning the CFR, "can find, nurture, and begin to put people in the kinds of jobs this country needs. That's going to be one of the major enterprises of the Council under me." The present CFR chairman, John J. McCloy, this is from 53 to 70, actually said they have been doing this since the 1940s and before. The thrust towards global government is well documented. But at the end of the 20th century, it does not look like a traditional conspiracy in the usual sense of a secret cabal of evil men meeting clandestinely behind closed doors. Rather, it is a networking of like-minded individuals in high places to achieve a common goal, as described in Marilyn Ferguson's 1980 Insider classic, The Aquarian Conspiracy. Now, perhaps the best way just to get a flavor of this whole thing is to take a look at a brief history of the New World Order. Not in our words, but in the words of those who have been striving to make it real. In 1912, Colonel Edward Mandell House, a close advisor to Wilson, publishes Philip Drew Administrator, in which he promotes socialism as dreamed of by Karl Marx. The next year, 1913, the Federal Reserve, which I think most of you realize is neither federal nor a reserve, is created. It was planned at a secret meeting in 1910 on Jekyll Island in Georgia by a group of bankers and politicians, including Colonel House. And this transferred the power to create money from the Treasury of the United States government to a group of private bankers. It is probably the largest generator of debt in the world. On May 30th of 1919, prominent British and American personalities established the Royal Institute of International Affairs in England and the Institute of International Affairs at the U.S. At a meeting arranged by Colonel House, attended by various Fabian socialists, including noted economist John Maynard Keynes, 2 years later, Colonel House organizes the Institute for International Affairs into the Council for Foreign Relations, the CFR. And on December 15th of 1922, the CFR endorses world government in its magazine of Foreign Affairs. Philip Kerr there wrote, "Obviously there's going to be no peace or prosperity for mankind as long as the earth remains divided into 50 or 60 independent states until some kind of international system is created. The real problem today is that of world government." In 1928, a book called The Open Conspiracy, Blueprints for a World Revolution by H.G. Wells published. And that's where he said, "The political world of the open conspiracy must weaken, efface, incorporate, and supersede existing governments. The open conspiracy is the natural inheritor of socialist and communist enthusiasms. It may be in control of Moscow before it is in control of New York, but the character of the open conspiracy will now be plainly displayed. It will be a world religion." Interesting. 1931, students of the Lenin School of Political Warfare in Moscow are taught as following, quote, "One day we shall start to spread the most theatrical peace movement the world has ever seen. The capitalist countries, stupid and decadent, will fall into the trap offered by the possibility of making new friends. Our day will come in 30 years or so. The bourgeoisie must be lulled into a false sense of security," and on it goes. Then in 1932, all kinds of new books are being published urging world order. Toward a Soviet America by William Z. Foster, head of the Communist Party, USA. He indicates that the National Department of Education would be one of the means used to develop a new socialist society in the United States. Another book, New World Order by F.S. Marvin, describing the League of Nations as the first attempt at a New World Order. He says nationality must rank below the claims of mankind as a whole. And then a book called Dare the School Build a New Social Order, published by educator, author George Counts. It asserts, quote, "The teachers should deliberately reach for power and then make the most of their conquest in order to influence the social attitudes, ideals, and behavior of the coming generation."